don't know if you are needing help in the organizational, systematizing, automation categories in 2025, but if you are, and I feel like all of us kind of fall into that category of needing help, this episode is going to be life-changing for you. Kara Myers, she is my good friend, and she's such an awesome blogger, and she is a systems and automation and organizational guru. She's the blogger at Sweetly Splendid. She joins me in this interview to talk about all the things organization that are going to change your life this year. She does not hold back at all in this interview. She gives all her best secrets about where to start if you need to get organized and what the next step is and what that next step is. She gives all the details. We also talk a lot about goals and how to set goals that you can achieve and how you should review your previous year and track your progress over the course of the year in order to stay on track. And of course, being flexible and having grace with yourself along the way is super important too. There's so much more in the episode. I couldn't even tell you all of it. You just have to listen to the magic yourself. You are going to devour this episode and you'll probably want to listen a couple of times. Kara, I could not be more excited to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very good. I'm excited to be here.
Yay. It's so good to see your face again. It's been a while and I miss seeing you since we did our mastermind calls together a few years ago. So great to see you.
I'm used to seeing your face every week.
Oh, yes. Okay. And you're joining us at the Mastermind Retreat next week, which is super exciting to talk about this very topic that we're talking about today. So I get to see you in person soon. We are going to talk about just creating an organized, streamlined, systematized year ahead. By the time this episode is published, it will be about the end of February, but that still gives you plenty of time to infuse some organization into your life. But before we get to that, do you have a fun fact to share?
The thing that I forget that people think is a fun fact is that I have peacocks. I have a whole little cluster of peacocks at my house.
That is unique. I don't see peacocks unless I'm at a zoo, but they just roam around.
Same until I moved to this home. They kind of came with the property, but I've learned all kinds of things about peacocks since then. We have probably 30 plus of them. So
what?
Peacocks are just a normal everyday part of my life now. We have to keep them out of the car. They're so nosy. They're like little nosy birds. So they always want to get in the car, try to get in the house, stuff like that. So it's always kind of just managing peacocks around here.
Okay, do you have one fun fact about peacocks that people might not know?
That a group of peacocks is called an ostentation.
What? Did you just make that up? Ostentation?
Like I said, I've learned a lot of things since having them.
Okay. My mind is blown. I don't even know what to say from here. Ostentation. Okay. Well, you stopped me in my tracks. Also, you do have tarantulas. I remember seeing a really disturbing picture of this on your Instagram feed.
Yes. And it was right around Halloween. So I would have loved to say that it was a Halloween decoration, but it absolutely was not. It was a real one.
I showed a lot of people that picture. I was like, you've got to see this. And everyone was like, no, do you know this person? Like, yeah, it's real.
Yeah. I live in Texas, so we have all the snakes, all the spiders, all the critters, all the scorpions. We have all of it. It's like a little mini Australia over here.
Yeah, you guys are like a little zoo that nobody wants to go to.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Well, that is ostentation. I'm going to have to remember that. Very intriguing fun fact. So I would love it, Kara, if you just talked a little bit about your blog. Tell us about Sweetly Splendid, when you started, your niche, and anything else you want to talk about.
So I started blogging in 2013. And it kind of came about because I've been cooking since I was little, but I had hit a point where people would always ask me for recipes. So I'm the kind of blogger that came into it from, I started this as a way to just share my recipes with my friends and family. And then it grew from there very quickly. I started out more of a broad level, like dinners, breakfasts, all of that sort of thing. But in the last couple of years, I kind of felt a little disconnected from my blog. And so I wanted to be a little bit more kind of in tune with what I wanted to put on my site. And so I niched down to just pretty much Southern and Tex-Mex food. So all the food you would find in the South and Texas. So everything from enchiladas to chicken fried steak and stuff like that. That's what you'll find on my blog. So, and I've really enjoyed narrowing it down to that. So I don't feel too trapped into small or narrow of a space, but it feels closer to my heart and I feel more connected with the recipes that I'm actually sharing instead of just sharing for the sake of sharing. So
Yeah. And if you haven't checked out Kara's blog, you have to. I've always thought your blog is so beautiful. Just the graphics, the design, the photos, everything is put together in such a just lovely, eye-appealing way. So love it. I love that you niche down too and that you have embraced that. Have you noticed that your traffic has gone up after niching down?
it actually did go up. It went up quite a bit. That's when I sort of started to see the incline more drastically. And one of the things that I've really liked is that it feels more of a connection with my audience. So even on socials and the type of comments that they leave and things like that, it feels more connected. It feels less generic. It feels like my Texas sheet cake. They talk about this is exactly like my grandma used to make it growing up when I would visit her. And I get comments like that since niching down versus how it was before. It was a lot more broad. It was like, yeah, this casserole is good. Now it's kind of that nostalgia factor for people as well that it feels like we share it. So I like it a lot.
Yeah. That's awesome. I haven't heard a bad story yet about niching down properly, like when it aligns and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that really is a key right now, just finding what aligns with you and your people and finding that niche. So I'm really glad that worked for you. Yeah. So alongside being an amazing blogger and talented photographer and all the things, you are also an expert in organization and creating systems for your business. I'm always amazed at how freaking organized and systematized and automated and just on your crap you are. You blow my mind, Kara, seriously. So give us your secrets. What would you say people need to know if, okay, this is a lot of people, by the way, if they're thinking, I need to be more organized this year. I want a system for my business, but I have nowhere to start. I have no idea where to start.
So one of the things that I would highly recommend they do is to get organized. So one of the things that as bloggers, and what I've noticed, especially with my coaching clients, is if they're bloggers, but they're also caretakers, whether that's for children or parents or whatever that is, they have so much in their brain at any given time, so much more than they even realize. So I'm a huge advocate of finding some sort of project management system that you can put all of that information that's in your head and let it be somewhere else. Let it sort of take that part of your brain for you. So instead of having to remember so many things and feeling so overwhelmed by all the different pieces and parts, letting a system kind of help you do that along the way. I always say everybody's brain works differently. All of our brains, we all kind of function differently. So it would be easy because I use ClickUp to say, use ClickUp, it's great. And I think you use Airtable, right?
Yep.
So it's easy to say, use Airtable, it's great. The thing is, we're all so different. So what works best for each of us is going to be a little bit different. But going in and finding these systems that just try them out. Do a trial. They all have free trials. So do a free trial. Some of them have free levels to them as well. Try them out. See kind of which one feels right to your brain, because it shouldn't feel like extra work. It should feel like it's helping you with your work. So kind of looking and seeing which one feels right, which one feels like it flows the way your brain flows, that makes the most sense to your brain. Whatever that system is, just kind of start learning a system like that and letting it take some of it off your plate. One of the things when we're really overwhelmed, and as bloggers, it can be so easy to become overwhelmed because there's so much. When I some of my clients when I say, I need you to write down, when we're working on templates, I need you to write down every single thing from start to finish that you do for a blog post. It gets them overwhelmed because they think, I did not realize I did this many things. And I'm like, and that's just a new blog post. That's not even all the things that happen after the fact or before the fact or at the same time in conjunction with it. So I always say there's so much, so let it take some of it away from you. And whichever one feels like it flows best with your mind, let it have some of that burden so that you're not constantly trying to remember, oh yeah, I shot chocolate chip cookies, but have I done the keyword research for it? Okay, I did the keyword research for chicken and rice casserole, but have I done the pictures for it? And then we're all kind of guilty. Something I laughed about at Flavor Media Summit last year is I asked, raise your hand if you've taken photos of a recipe and it never ended up on your site because you forgot you had it. And nearly everyone raised their hand.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's kind of like little things like that. Like let it take that part from you. So finding a system, and maybe that is just Excel spreadsheets for you. Maybe that's what it is, but finding something that feels right, that you can kind of share everything that's in your brain with.
Do you ever encounter clients who have stuff scattered everywhere? So part of it's just in their head, maybe part of it's in an Excel sheet, part of it's on their blog, part of it's in Trello. And if so, what do you tell them to do?
So the first step firstly, yes, that's actually the case for a lot of people. They have stuff in their notes in their phone, but then they have stuff in spreadsheets. But then they've also kind of started to use Notion, but then they've kind of also started to use Airtable, but then they also have like Google Docs over here. So it's very common for people to have stuff sort of spread everywhere. But the one thing I tell them is try to get it all in one place. So when you have your ideas list, stop writing ideas on paper and in the notes in your phone and in an Excel spreadsheet and in this other place. Try to take small steps at a time. So start with just your ideas, and maybe an Excel spreadsheet makes the most sense for you because you like to put them in categories or whatever it is. There is an app that takes you straight to Google Sheets. You can have an app for that on your phone. So instead of going to the Notes app on your phone, go to the Sheets app and put it in there. So little things that will help you sort of condense it into one place. So instead of looking everywhere for all the pieces and parts, try to just take little sections of your business, whether that's ideas, whether it's the posts in progress, whether it's the content updating or whatever it may be. Try to have it in one place and try to condense that little section into one place to start. And then it's kind of like, well, you actually bought me this book, Atomic Habits.
Yes,
and if you can habit stack that, kind of using that same concept of taking little pieces at a time. And if you can get all of your ideas in one place, okay, cool, you've got that taken care of. Now let's work on your posts in progress. Let's have all of that in one place, whether that means having a checklist or having a Google document or whatever it is, or some project management system, have it in one place. And then as you do each of those parts, you can kind of over time start to condense them all together to where they all live in one place. So it doesn't feel so overwhelming to have to do a whole system, because it can. When I joke that when I switched to ClickUp, I kept saying I need a project management system to set up my project management system. It felt so much. So I always say, like, just try to take it in little pieces and parts so that you don't just flood yourself at one time.
Yeah. So step one, get your stuff all in one spot. And I know people tend to think ahead too far, like you were saying, like this whole thing is too complicated and overwhelming. I can't possibly get to the point where everything is in ClickUp. Well, first, just get it into a Google Sheet or Airtable. And then I think intuitively, you know, kind of what to do from there. Like the next step will lead you in the right direction. But first, you got to get stuff out of your head, and you have to get stuff from all the different places. I talk to so many people who are like, yeah, most of it's in my head, but I have this here and then I have some stuff here. And it just like, oh, it makes me a little bit crazy. Like, how do you do that? I don't know how people function like that, but it adds so much clarity to your business and your
Mhm.
mind, right? When you can do that.
It does. The one thing about bloggers specifically is we're creatives and we need that space in our brain to be creative. When we
Yes.
start filling it with all of the other stuff, it doesn't leave any space for that creativity to flourish and actually do what it does best and be creative. And so it's really, really helpful if you kind of give thinking of it as kind of a container that's full of stuff. If there's no room for creativity and you're filling it with everything else, it makes blogging in general harder. It makes writing harder. If you do your own writing, it makes the writing
Everything.
harder. It
Yeah.
makes the photography harder. It makes coming up with ideas harder. It makes, even if you're just taking the pictures of it, just trying to style the food, it makes it harder because there's just no basically room for the creativity to breathe. So you're forcing everything at that point. So if you can take extra things out of your brain to kind of give it that room, your whole blog sort of pays off by having all of these little organization things in place where you're not having to manage them in your brain the whole time.
And your mental health. I think it helps
Yes.
you mentally so much.
Yes.
So, in a nutshell, get everything in one spot, even if it takes time. Just
Mm-hmm.
set aside the time to do it. I remember when you switched to ClickUp and you were like, oh my gosh, it was kind of an undertaking, but you were so happy when it was finished. I mean, it
Yes.
literally changed everything for you.
Mm-hmm. It
Yeah.
really did.
So,
It's my entire blog essentially lives within ClickUp right now. I mean, every piece and part, and people will ask me, well, how do you coordinate that with Google Docs? Well, it integrates with Google Docs. So I can still use those things, but I don't have to go anywhere other than to ClickUp. When I start my day, I can go to ClickUp and I can start everything from there. I can see that where everything is, the status, I can see kind of where I'm at, my schedule is in there. And it all does integrate with other things, which a lot of these systems do. They'll integrate with your Google Calendar. So if it makes more sense to you and feels right to look at your Google Calendar instead of a project management system, you can do that. They integrate with each other. But the cool thing is, if you have it all in one place, you're not going and searching for all of the stuff.
right.
And it's crazy how much time a lot of people spend just looking for stuff, just trying to
Yeah.
find the thing that they did or the thing that they wrote or the research they did or whatever it may be. So
Those minutes
having it
add
in one
up.
place is key.
Yeah. So once people have their content and all of the information stored in one spot that's easy to access, what do they do from there to get organized?
I would say looking at it's kind of being honest with ourselves. Where is your downfall? Where do things bottleneck? Where do things kind of go off the rails? Where do you feel like every time I go to write, it takes me 5 hours to write, or it shouldn't take me this long to do XYZ. It shouldn't take me long to do this. Being honest with yourself of what is that hiccup? What is that spot? And how can you sort of think of it as like a wrinkle? How can you iron it out so that you're not going over the humps and it's just kind of a straight, smooth line through it? So, really looking at one thing I like to recommend is write down what takes up the most amount of your time. Is that content updating? Is that your new posts? Is it posting to Instagram? Is it working on your Pinterest? What is that spot that you just feel like is always eating up all of your time? So let's say it's post in progress. Go in there and say, okay, what do I do from start to finish when I do a post? And then the thing I like to tell people is just do it, but time audit yourself. Don't do it any differently than you would otherwise. There's tons of apps that you can use to just track your time that are super simple, super fast. And just go through and time yourself. And you'll notice as you're looking at your time audit patterns, and you'll see, I spend so much time doing this one spot. And a lot of people that I find it's very, very common in my coaching clients is it's their writing. They say, writing takes me so long and I feel like it shouldn't take me this long. So you have two options. You can either improve how you're doing your writing and that process of how you're doing it, or you can hire it out. I'm a big advocate for both. Whatever makes the most sense to you. But writing, the common theme that I find is, so they'll talk about, okay, this is my process. I decide on the recipe that I'm going to make. And then I do the keyword research. And then I take the pictures and, do all that, do the editing, and then I write it. But what they're doing is when they go to write it, they're doing keyword research again. So they didn't actually do the keyword research in its entirety in the step that what they thought in their brain was, I already did the keyword research. I'm done. Well, when they get to writing, what they're actually doing, why it's taking so long, they're not just writing. They're writing, but they're also redoing keyword research again in that same time frame. So it's kind of being honest with yourself and seeing, okay, how could I, instead of me doing the keyword research twice, go through and say, okay, when I do the keyword research the first time, I'm going to make sure I pick my title, I pick my main keyword, however, we all have different methods for our SEO, but whatever it is, you're doing it to completion in that moment, and stick with it when you go to write. Don't say, well, let me redo the whole thing all over again. And really, as you think through your process, being honest with yourself in, okay, where is my hiccup? And we all have little faults. Mine is editing video. I don't enjoy editing video. So if I look at my bottleneck, that's where it is every time. And I'm guilty of it. And I know I'm guilty of it. But what I've done is I've gotten very organized to where I can have others help in those tiny little steps in between that always get me caught up and stop that forward motion. So kind of just looking and time auditing yourself, because you'll be able to see, okay, I'm really organized in most of this, and this is where that stops. So most people think my whole business is unorganized. My whole process is unorganized. And that's usually not the case. It's usually a small step within that whole timeline that is where the hiccup happens, and just sort of ironing out the wrinkles in that little step, you'll start to realize, okay, I'm actually very organized up until this point. So what can I do? What are the little systems I could put into place? Is it because when I go to write, I have my keywords on paper in a notebook and in Excel and on a Google Doc? Okay, let's condense them into that one spot thing. One of my friends, you're familiar with her, Brittany Roche, she laughs because I say the one notebook. Quit having a bunch of notebooks. Have the one notebook. The notebook. So quit having multiple notebooks if that's but you'll really notice there's little things you can do to improve the organization and your system as a whole if you just time audit yourself and see what's the hiccup.
There's so much power in the time audit. And it is amazing. I even am victim to this before I time audit, I always think I know what my issues are or where my time is going. And then after the time audit, I'm always shocked. Like, I had no idea. And that's after doing it. I do that at least once or twice a year, if not more, if I'm having a tough year. Even after doing it so many times, I still get shocked from my time audits. I think it's so revealing. It's almost like you're learning about another person. You're like, what? I spend my time on that? I did that? That's my issue? It's so crazy.
It is, because what you'll also notice is some people spend a lot more time on tiny tasks than they realize. So one that I always point out is people always ask about hiring out for a VA. What do I tell my VA to do? And I say, do a time audit, because you'll realize all the tiny things they could be doing that you're actually spending more time on than you realize, like alt text or filling out your recipe card, or, just little things like that, or the format of your post on the back end. Like if you have some sort of template that you're using, let your VA put the template on the post for you. Let them choose the categories. Let them do that. And then once you've uploaded your photos, let them do the alt text. Let them put the recipe card in. Little things like that in a time audit, you'll really see, wow, I spent an hour putting my recipe card in.
Yeah.
I thought I spent 5 minutes doing that. So
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you do it for a week, I always say like 3 to 7 days. 7 days is ideal to capture an entire week. But if you do it for a full week, you can capture all of those little moments. And it's shocking to see them all added up over a period of time. I think everyone listening should absolutely perform a time audit on their business to start the year, just to have a baseline. So, like what you're saying, Kara, find those bottlenecks, find the issues, find the things you need help with, and then that really helps you move forward.
Yeah, because a lot of people go into it with just, I'm so disorganized, I'm so all over the place. But what they'll find once they do that audit is they're a little bit more organized than they realize. It's just little pieces that
Right. Just one or two
need
things or
that
something. Right.
finessing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So once we have our content somewhere, we have done a time audit, we feel a little bit more like we have a handle on where our gaps are, where we need to, what things we need to fix. What do we do from there?
So, what I would say is that's kind of the point where you utilize something like a project management system. So, um, this is kind of the big step, but I definitely want your listeners to know if you do the tiny steps leading up to it, this doesn't feel like such a big step if you do these other small things beforehand. But that would be the step that I am a huge advocate. Use some sort of project management system. And this is the step where you would do that. Because now at this point, you know kind of the process that you follow through most scenarios, when whether it's a content update, whether it's posting on Pinterest, whatever it is, you kind of know your process at this point because you've done a time audit. You've kind of gotten everything in one place. You've kind of assessed and been honest with yourself about working through those things. So you go into using some sort of management system. The biggest thing I tell people is know the differences between them. And a simple kind of example of that is Airtable versus ClickUp. So Airtable is a database management system where ClickUp is a project management system. So ClickUp's going to take you through the whole project from start to finish, and it's all going to be connected. Airtable is going to manage all of your data for you. So if you're somebody that your brain is like, I just need it all in one place and organized in a really good system, Airtable will probably be your jam. It would probably work really well. Now, if you're somebody like the way my brain works, I'm like, hey, I want you to tell me what I need to work on today. I just want to log on and you tell me what I need to be working on. ClickUp works really well for that. Asana works really well for that. Notion works in a little bit of a different way. It's got a lot of lists and checklists and things like that. So if that's sort of the way your brain works, going that direction works as well. But that's the step I would say. Really dive into some sort of management system. A lot of bloggers live in a lot of spreadsheets, and it's really fine for a while, but we all sort of hit this point where it's like, I'm in so many spreadsheets, I can't keep my head straight. So I would say, as intimidating as it might feel, dive into a project management system. And some of them are very inexpensive. ClickUp has a free plan. It also, like, their lowest plan, I think, is like $7 or $10, something like that.
Oh, that's not
So they're
bad.
really cost effective too. And I know when you're a smaller blogger, it can feel like every little expense is
Yeah.
it is just a lot. But I would encourage everyone to think about, yes, you might be spending the $7 to $10 a month, but you are going to be so much more productive. You're going to be able to put out so much more content. You're going to be able to be so much more organized that your business will naturally grow, and it will have so much more success than being so spread out. So the $10 is worth it. It's
Yes.
very worth
Right.
it.
Yeah.
But that's the major step, and it's the big one. But it feels a little less hard whenever you've done all the
Yeah.
baby
Yeah.
steps leading up to it.
Getting over that big piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't use ClickUp, but is ClickUp and also Asana, are they fairly easy to use and learn?
To learn, no, I'll be honest about that. It's actually why it's a service I offer for bloggers, is to set theirs up for them, because some people say, I just want to use it. I don't want to learn it. I just want to use it. Just if somebody else can set it up, I'll get in there and I'll start using it. But they're so robust, and Asana's, I feel personally, a little bit easier to set up than ClickUp, but they're so robust that they can feel very intimidating. You can feel like, I don't even know how to set this up. And one of the kind of hurdles with it is that blogging businesses are so different than other businesses, that it needs a little bit of a different setup. What might work in all these YouTube videos and the help articles that you find, it might kind of be like, this sounds like it might work, but I don't know how this would really help me with a blog. It's really how you set it up that helps. And the one thing I would encourage people to do is, if you are going to use ClickUp as a blogger, having different sections for the different sections of your business. So for me personally, I have new posts in one section, content updates are in another section, social media is in another section, and kind of just have automations that interlink them, but it keeps them organized in kind of a folder structure that makes more sense for a blogger. Because as a blogger, we touch so many pieces and parts. Whereas in other businesses, they have a marketing department and an accounting department, and this person doesn't deal with the billing or whatever. We touch everything in our business from start to finish. So keeping in mind, having them as sorted out in just different sections of the business, even though you're the person touching all of them, have them sorted out in different sections. It will make setting up those systems a little bit easier.
So once you've gotten that big hurdle out of the way and just you have everything in a project management system, you feel organized, really it's about maintaining it from there, right?
Yes. It's using it is the thing, not just maintaining it, but using it. So what'll happen a lot of the time is they'll say, okay, I've got it all in there. And then it's like, okay, but that's just another thing for me to do. So I don't have time to do it. So then they don't end up utilizing it. So that's one of the reasons I say use the one that works best with your brain, because it won't feel as like an extra step, but using it. So in ClickUp, one of the big things is I say, assign things to yourself and give yourself due dates. You are the boss. You can change your due dates. There's nobody over you telling you that you're late, you can't do this. You can always change your own due dates, but by assigning things to yourself, using the due dates, actually putting the information in there, it becomes this usable system. And in the first couple of days, it feels like, okay, all I'm doing is just adding an extra step in here. But as you start using the system a little bit more and a little bit more, you'll start to realize, awesome, I don't have to remember that I already took the pictures of my chocolate chip cookies. It remembers it for me. And because I put the dates in there and all of that, it tells me when I need to do my next step. So one of the really cool things I like about it is if you really utilize them, you don't have to think about what do I need to work on today. They kind of tell you what you need to work on today. And it keeps you on track and on schedule and kind of in line with your goals. And so using it, that's the biggest step.
Use it. Yes. And just taking all that stuff out of your brain that does not need to be there. Put it somewhere where it's actually effective. And like you said, it's going to remind you so you don't have to remind yourself. I think that's the hugest piece. So actually go in after you've set it up and use it, even if it feels awkward or overwhelming. This in itself is a system. I mean, it's a huge system in your business. It's probably the baseline system. Do you have other systems you use that help you in your business? I mean, we could get into so many things, but just any that come to mind.
So another thing I love to use is it's an email system called Superhuman. It is not free. You do have to pay for it, but it's a little system that I use because, which you know, Megan, I had emails for days and days and days.
Galore.
I could do emails as a full-time job at one point.
Yeah.
And so I just could not get ahead of my inbox. I couldn't, no matter what I did. And I do have multiple businesses, so that plays a large factor into the amount of emails that I receive on a daily basis. But I just could not get ahead. So one of the projects I made for myself, it was towards the end of 2023, was I have to find some way to manage these emails. I need some sort of system that can help me manage these, because the way my businesses work, I can't have someone else managing my email for me. So I needed something to sort of help out with that. And I was doing a bunch of research and I found this program called Superhuman. And it was a little of an adjustment at first, but the way it functions really does save time in my day. And it's its own little system. So it divides my inboxes out into various inboxes. So for me, they automatically do important and other, but because I have coaching clients and I do a lot of meetings and things like that, I have an entire inbox dedicated to calendar. So anything related to my calendar that comes in, it goes into that inbox instead. And then I have various different ones set up. Invoices is another one I have set up. So anything that's an invoice goes into this inbox so that I can see they don't get lost in the shuffle. I can quickly see, okay, these are the invoices. This is what needs to be paid. They don't get sort of lost in the weeds. But one of the systems that I set up for myself was, in order to be able to get to inbox zero, was switching from I need to get through my inbox to does this need to be answered today? When does this need to be answered? Do I need to do this today? And Superhuman was really good about that function. Now, Gmail also has that function. I'm sure I don't use anything else, but I'm sure other ones have that function as well. But I can basically say, remind me of this tomorrow at 12, because I know I don't need to answer this today, and it gets it out of my inbox, but brings it back in tomorrow at 12. So I actually am able to get to inbox zero on days, and I don't have just emails sitting in my inbox that are like, okay, but I do need to get to these, but not right now. I don't have those sitting in there just staring at me at the end of the day, because that's another one of
the
those.
Worst. Oh.
It sits on your mind, and you're like, I need to get rid of this. So that's one of the systems I put into place. I've also done little things like, for my coaching clients, it's reoccurring invoicing. A lot of people think, well, I only spend a couple of minutes doing this. I only spend there's just a little bit of time I spend on this. Well, that little bit of time really starts to add up over time. So even on my coaching side of my business, I have automated invoicing set up so that I don't have to sit there and do those manual invoices each month. So anything that's outside of ClickUp, I have lots of little pieces here and there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anything you can find that saves you those minutes. And like you said, those minutes truly add up. They really do. And especially if you do a time audit, you will see that like 5 minutes a day might actually be 28 minutes a day. And then when you add it up over the course of a week, oh my gosh, that could be hours that you could be spending on something else. So yeah, those minutes are important. And how does goal setting play into all of this? Because for me, that helps me stay on track. It helps me keep my mind focused on where I'm going and what I'm doing each day and each week. How do you handle your goals?
So I have kind of a system that I use that's a little unique when I set my goals. A couple of things when you're setting them, I always say you have to look at your previous year. You can't look at the next year without looking at your previous year. Where did you land? And I always tell people, look at your monetary, but also your traffic. Look at all of them, big and small, because every growth you've had matters, and it helps motivate you to set your goals for the upcoming year. So I'm a big advocate that when you set your goals for the following year, so let's say you're setting your goals for 2025, to not just set a monetary goal or just a traffic goal or just a growth goal or whatever it is, set multiple types of goals in kind of different categories. And then you're going to break them down further after that. So let's say that you decide you are going to do a traffic goal, and it's going to be, I don't know, I'm just going to pull a number out of the air, but let's say you want 12,000 more sessions over the course of the year. I know that's a smaller number, but let's say 12,000 more sessions over the course of the year. That's great. But where are those sessions coming from? So looking at it from a perspective of what source is that coming from? So instead of just saying 12,000 overall, what was your traffic for 2024? How much of it came from Google? How much of it came from Pinterest? How much of it came from socials, all the email, all the different channels? And think about the increases per channel that the traffic came from. Because what you're going to do there is how you're going to grow your traffic on Pinterest is different than how you're going to grow it through email, than how you're going to grow it through Google. So what that does is, by breaking it down a little bit further, okay, so you've said 12,000 for the year. Let's say that breaks down to 1,000 a month. Okay, the split of those, what's that account for? Okay, whatever the percentages of that's Pinterest. All right, how am I going to grow my Pinterest? Does that mean more fresh pins? Does it mean I'm going to repin more? Does it mean I'm going to utilize a different plugin on my site? What is that? All of these goals play into your daily and your weekly calendar, and they start to pile up on you very quickly. So I always say, have a few different goals, and I'm a huge advocate. I tell all of my coaching clients, make a goal that is a work-life balance goal as well. And that's because of you. You told me to do that in the beginning.
I remember that.
Yes. And
It's
so
so
I always say
important.
have a work-life balance goal as one of your goals for the year. This year, I'm very guilty of working every day. So my work-life balance goal this year is to have one day a week I don't work at all. And
Yay. You deserve
I,
that.
I hope I can do it. It's hard, but I hope I
You
can do
can
it.
do it. You can do it.
But it seems like, okay, that's easy. You're just going to take a day off in the week. Well, no, I have to prep for that. So I once again have put a little bit on myself, and all of these things add up into your weekly and your daily tasks. So even if you want to grow your Instagram, well, are you going to post more? Are you going to be on your stories more? Are you going to whatever? So it's always going to add tasks to your daily and weekly workload. And how are you going to track that? So by being organized, you can say, okay, in order to grow my Instagram, I've decided that I'm going to post 3 reels a week, 1 carousel, and I'm going to be on my stories 3 days a week. Okay, that's great in theory, but number 1, can you execute it? Number 2, how are you going to track that you're actually doing that in an easy and sustainable way? And if you're organized, you can do little things like, okay, well, my content, this is the content I'm coming out with, and there's 3 of those. So cool, I'll have my 3 reels. What do I need to fill in the carousels with? Okay, that's what I'll put there. And what do I want to talk about on my stories? It allows you a little bit to plan ahead and manage your workload a little bit better. So instead of being disappointed with yourself in August that, well, I'm not meeting my goals, I'm not reaching what I thought I was going to. If you break them down in the beginning, you can see your workload, you can be organized with them so that I'm doing all of these steps to build up to achieving this goal. And is it realistic? And does it fit in with my schedule? And am I able to actually do this? A lot of us are really quick to be like, I'll post 7 reels in a week.
Yes. Yeah.
And if we're able to actually look at it from a perspective of, okay, here's how much time I have in my day and in my week, can I realistically meet this? And it helps us sort of work through that. And by kind of doing all the things we've talked about, having those time audits, having an organized system, doing all of those things, you can easily start to incorporate the steps you want to take to reach those goals versus just having them as an unattainable list that sort of sits on the side.
I've been there. I've done that in the past where it's like, I'm going to post 9 million new recipes this year. And then you get halfway through the year and you're like, wow, I am nowhere close. So doing what you're saying is so smart. Do you have a system for tracking your progress along the way? So I don't know, like quarterly, monthly, how do you go about doing that?
I actually review mine monthly. So at the end of each month, I decide the steps I'm going to take after I break out my goals, I decide the steps I'm going to take to achieve those goals. And then at the end of January, I'll review and say a couple of things. Did I reach sort of the growth that I wanted to reach on that? And were the steps I took to get there sustainable? Because a few things, a lot of times we'll get kind of down on ourselves because we're like, I'm not reaching the goal when you're reviewing it in June. But did you give yourself realistic steps, sustainable steps? Has your life changed? For instance, did you get pregnant? Did you have a death in the family? Have you had changes in your life that dictate that you can't still do the same steps that you could before when you made that initial plan? And we're really quick to just get down on ourselves of, I didn't reach it. This sucks. I didn't reach it. But instead, I review mine monthly. So at the end of January, at the end of January, I will go back and I'll say, okay, did I have the growth I wanted to have in whatever the goal is? Did I meet that? And were the steps I took sustainable? And if I didn't reach it, I'll look at things like, can I change my steps up a little bit? Is there something different I can try? Do I need to do more? Do I need to do less? Do I need to swap something out? A big change for me that's happening this year, I had a big platform on TikTok and that's going away. So I'm making a huge shift over into Instagram. And what that means for me is I'm taking the time dedicated to that over into Instagram. But had I not known in advance that TikTok was going away, I could get to June and be like, well, I lost the TikTok traffic. So
Right.
what a bummer. But by reviewing monthly, you're able to see, okay, I need to shift this a little bit or change my steps or change kind of how I'm doing things. And it might be something as small as if you're looking to grow your email list and your opt-in isn't working at the end of January, you can say, okay, why is my opt-in not working? That was one of the things I was really hoping to bank on. What can I adjust here? Rather than getting to June and being like, well, I'm not even close. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you said earlier is so important, just having grace for life too, because all of us happen to be human and humans experience setbacks, grief, depression, burnout. I had that in 2024, was not expecting that. So to reassess occasionally and to keep that in mind and not to hold yourself to those standards that you set in January, because they're not always going to be the same. So to have just so much grace with yourself. And I think celebrating wins along the way is really important too. You kind of touched on that. Like, what have you done? Okay, sit down and look at what you've accomplished and really just being proud of what you've done despite being a human and having things happen. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. There's not a year that goes by, I think, for any of us that we're not like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Exactly.
Things happen all the time. And just
Yes.
knowing that, like, you're not going to have a perfect year ever, and being okay with that. So you track progress monthly. I love that. Should we talk a little bit about ways to automate? You talked about ClickUp a little bit and how you can kind of integrate ClickUp with other platforms. What are some of your favorite ways to automate?
So I will say my number one favorite automation is inside ClickUp, but I have to share it, is that my content updates tell me what I need to update versus me doing all of these, like a bunch of analyzing of my posts and all of these things. I have an automation set up that at certain intervals of time, it brings up the post for me to review it and me to update it. That's my favorite one because that's the thing I'm so quick to put at the bottom of my list that I say, okay, I don't want to deal with this content update right now. I'll look at it later. But by having it fed to me in an automation, it's so much easier for my brain to be like, okay, cool. This is the one we're working on right now. And I don't have to feel like I'm analyzing everything and having to go into a huge process. So that I will say that one's within ClickUp, but if you can do some sort of system that gives you your content updates that you want to work on rather than having to analyze them every time, it's such a time saver. It saves so much mental space. I love it. I have other automations. When I used to type my my blog posts in Google Docs, there's a system called Wordable, and it will automatically put it over into WordPress for you, which was great. I use a couple of different systems that go through Zapier. I think Zapier is a really good system to use so that your information is just going for you. There's a plugin out there that will automate your alt text for you. That one is really great. You can tell it your keyword and then it will help you with the alt text to save you the time of typing all of that in. I am an advocate for anything that will send you a reminder, bring it back up for you, where you are not spending the time analyzing stuff. And so anything that can sort of give you a calendar or a schedule of things, I'm a huge advocate for. But little things, a lot of people are like, I don't like automations. I don't use automations. Well, if you use automatic bill pay, you use automations.
Yeah.
And little things like syncing your bank account. If you use QuickBooks, if you use Wave, if you use Xero, sync your bank account with it. Little things like that, they all add up. So if you can find any little way to have an automation in your system, it pays off tenfold.
And if you can have, say, 10 automations, think of all the time you're going to save there.
Yes.
If you have Zapier, I always like going through Zapier and looking at the examples. Like in my mind, I'm like, I don't really know what is possible to automate. So going through some examples really helps me like, oh yeah, I could do that. There are some pretty amazing things that you can automate through Zapier. And I think there are other automation tools as well, correct? I
There
don't know what they
are.
are.
I've tested a couple, but Zapier is the one I kind of always fall
Hmm.
back to. But little things like, do you always run reports or do you always want to see your traffic in a certain way? So for me, full transparency, I use finite analytics now, but prior to using that, I was spending so much time doing like custom reports in GA4, and I was finding that I'm looking at the same information every time, just with different dates. So I actually set up an automation to where it would pull information for me over into a Google spreadsheet so that I could see.
Mhm.
I
Oh.
could I could pull into a Google spreadsheet because I was pulling the same information every time. But the time I was wasting going into GA4, even with saved reports and everything, it was really just eating up my time. And that was one of the things I used Zapier for beforehand, before I was using Finite. But I would use Zapier for that, just to pull in. So all I would need to do is open the spreadsheet versus going into GA4 and pulling up each one of those individual reports. Because even though they were saved, it's still going into each individual one.
Absolutely. And that's something so little that
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't typically think to automate, but research it. I say if there's something little you do, there's probably a way to automate it if it's one of those
Absolutely.
repetitive things that you do all the time.
Absolutely.
Um, okay, Kara, what have we not covered? If there's anything you're thinking of that people need to know if they are looking to get more organized, systematized. Those are big words, by the way. Organized, systematized,
It makes it sound
automated.
very
It's
complicated
like the
and technical.
longest title. I know. um, yeah. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think is really important to mention?
I would just say it's really important to give yourself some grace, like you've said, give yourself some grace. And remember, you probably are a little bit more organized than you think you are. It's just areas you're not organized in. But the biggest thing I would say is even if you don't feel ready to go to like a full project management system or anything like that, finding that little hiccup and finding little ways to work through them is going to make such a difference in your workflow as a whole. It's going to make such a difference in your entire process. And probably one of the things, this is kind of, everybody's got their own opinion on it, but I would love to mention it because I think I see the biggest change in people when they work on this. I'm not a batch person. I don't like to batch work. It just doesn't really work. It doesn't flow well for my brain. The only thing I batch is photography, and that's because I batch things that go well together. Um, but that's the only thing I batch. My brain doesn't function well on, I'm going to spend this whole week writing posts and this week I'm going to do keyword. I don't do well in that. But the one thing that I will say is planning your content in advance will make such a big difference in your organization. Even if you're a person that says, I just want to make what I want to make when I want to make it, getting that small organization piece of planning your content in advance will help you so much. So even if you're somebody that, okay, I just want to plan a little bit at a time, that's great. At the beginning of January, decide what you're posting for February. At the beginning of February, decide what you're posting for March and keep it as simple as that. I say probably planning a quarter at a time is going to give you a really good leg up. I plan a year at a time, but I know that's not for everybody. But what that does is it allows you to be more organized in your entire process leading up to creating that content. Even if you're somebody that, because some people like to do a blog post from start to finish. They want to go from start to finish before they start the next one, and that's totally fine. But knowing
Hmm.
what you have coming up helps you to organize your day, organize your weekly workflow, know what you have coming up, giving yourself that grace because life happens. You know, hey, this is what I'm working on next month. So having that little thing in your pocket of, I know what I have coming up, will help alleviate so much of that chaos feeling and that unorganized feeling, and it's just a small simple step. And even if you're somebody that's, I can't plan too far in advance, or I lose my momentum, or I want to change everything, I say you're your own boss. If you decide you want to change what you're posting to your blog, that's your choice. You can
Yeah.
totally do that. But give yourself that little leg up of planning a little bit in advance and planning your content just a little bit in advance, because you'll really, really notice a huge difference in how you can get organized leading up to it. And you can work on different things. A huge thing I'm an advocate for is you have big energy days and low energy days. So on those big energy days, you can say, okay, the hard parts of these things I'm working on in February, I'm going to go ahead and do them today because it's a big energy day for me. And then let's say you have a low mental energy day, you can go in and say, okay, what are the easy things on those posts I can knock out today and work on in advance? And you can go in and do those because you have that small step done.
Yeah.
So that's like the biggest takeaway I would want people to try, at least try.
I love it. And I think once you try it, even just dip your toe in the water, you kind of get addicted. You're like, ooh, this feels really good. Being ahead of schedule feels amazing. So then you'll probably want to do more. Do you find that with your clients that they want to do more of it? Yeah.
Very much so. I have people that are like, absolutely not. I cannot plan. I don't want to do that because it's going to take all of my creativity away. I cannot do that. I'll want to change every single one. It'll feel too robotic. Once I've convinced them to just do 1 month, they're like, okay, I finally got to schedule a post, which is also an automation, I should say. Or it's a system. Yeah. If you schedule a post, it's automatically going live for you. They'll say, I actually got to schedule a post. I didn't have to do it live right then and there. I actually got to schedule it. I got to schedule out my email. I got to schedule out this. So it makes such a difference. And you don't realize like how much you're putting on yourself on a day-to-day basis by not having it decided. And some people will say, I have a list. I just pull from a list. I decide this is my list and I'm going to grab one. I just encourage you, look at the list and pull the ones for the next month.
Right. Yeah. Test it out. You'll probably fall in love. So with all of this, Kara, with getting organized, getting systematized, getting automated, the bottom line is that you're going to have more time. You're going to have more mental space. You are going to have more money probably because you're going to have more time to work on important things. Is there anything I'm missing?
No, I would say that's pretty much it. And being organized, once you do get to a point where you can hire out, it's a lot easier to hire out. I always tell people, does it need your brain or a brain? If it just needs a brain and not your brain, you can work to get organized to outsource those things, and being organized makes it that step even easier. So, but I will say you will make more money being organized. I promise, I can promise everyone, every listener in this, you will make more money if you are a little bit more organized.
Totally. I totally agree. And I'm so grateful for you being here and taking the time for us, Kara. As always, you delivered. It's amazing. I know you're going to inspire a ton of people to get organized. Come on, we can do it this year, right? Yeah. We've got this together. Do you have a favorite quote or words of inspiration to leave us with?
The inspiration I'd want to leave them with is, I know it can feel big, but you can do it. I have faith in every single one of the listeners in this. You can absolutely do it. Just take it a tiny piece at a time. Even if you feel you are so all over the place, you can absolutely do this and give yourself the courage to do it, because I fully, fully believe I've seen the people that say, I don't want to be organized, I can't be organized, go to even just a little organized and seeing the growth in their business. So you guys can do it. And I believe in each and every one of them that they can do it.
Oh, love that so much. We're going to put together a show notes page for you, Kara. We'll put everything we've talked about in the episode in your show notes, and you can find that at eatblogtalk.com/sweetly splendid. So head there and check it out. Also, Kara, tell people where they can go to find you. And I know that you have an offer for some group coaching, correct? So you can mention that as well.
Yes. So they can find me at sweetlysplendid.com, or if you're interested in my coaching, it's /coaching. But because there is a wait list for that, I decided in 2025 that I'm going to offer 2 8-week group coaching sessions. And so for the eBlog Talk podcast listeners, I'm going to offer a discount to them for that. So they can just use a discount code that's eatblogtalk.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's so generous of you. And if you guys need help getting organized, Kara is the best. You are in such good hands with her. So I hope that your group coaching is a huge success, Kara. I know it will be. But thank you again, Kara. Tell your peacocks hello and tell your tarantulas I do not say hello. Yeah, and thank you for listening, food bloggers. I will see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this topic, be sure to watch the video shown on the screen. See you next time.